at a time when the august House is caught between a bulldozing executive and a weakened opposition that is not interested in providing any real resistance on the floor. Wow. Joining me now for discussions here in studio, I'll be introducing my guests. Yes, Dunstan Omari, a lawyer, and Johnson Gedaka, a policy strategist. Good morning, gentlemen. Karibuni sana.
Good morning.
We are in for very interesting times. Parliament resumes today. Of course, now is when they're getting down to business following naming of cabinet, because mostly after the election last year, the entire period, even the swearing in and all these things, not much work was done by Parliament. This is when they're starting work properly. But even before that happens, you can already see the divisions. The quality of debate is already in question. NASA already says it will not be part of that vetting process for the cabinet nominees. Yet, that is one of the biggest jobs just starting out. The formation of the parliamentary, the main committee of Parliament, the Business Committee, thank you for that, the Business Committee of Parliament, they say they're not interested in that as well. What does this mean for the country? What does this mean when one side of Parliament decides to stay away from the House? Master.
Well, what we are facing is a reality of what we did on the 8th of August 2017, in that Jubilee, we elected a majority, a terrain of majority of numbers in the Jubilee. We did not factor in that there needs to be a strong opposition in terms of representation. So Jubilee has numbers. NASA doesn't have numbers. It seems that NASA has been outmaneuvered from the presidential contest to the legislative contest. What is likely to happen is that Jubilee will pass all the bills the way it wants. What I'm likely to see within a very short time is that quite a number of NASA members of Parliament are either going to be outboxed to join Jubilee, they will be lured to join Jubilee, they will find that it serves no purpose to be in NASA for some time. And we are going to see, in my own view, huge numbers of migrants, nomads from NASA moving to Jubilee. What is likely to happen, if that comes to pass, then we are going to have internal conflict within Jubilee, because very many people are likely to join Jubilee with very diverse backgrounds, philosophies, political aspirations. If that happens, we are likely to see an implosion coming in Jubilee. This, I take a historical perspective that in 2002, towards 2001, everybody moved to KANU. When everybody moved to KANU, being led by Raila Odinga, Musalia Mudavadi, everybody went to KANU. And when an implosion happened, then we saw NAC coming out and winning. So in what we are likely to see now is that no stiff opposition. NASA is going to fiddle. The presidential candidate for NASA got advice that was not sound, legal advice that was not sound. The fact that he did not contest, the fact that he is not part and parcel of the parliamentary processes, therefore he is not in a position to provide leadership, to provide the checks and balances. And when you look at the formation of Jubilee, Jubilee has taken the Chinese model. Already we have a cabinet minister for political philosophy, that is Tuju. We have him sitting in cabinet. We have cabinet administrative secretaries being very key positions within the structure of the ministerial positions. So we are seeing a very resurgent party.
Yes.
And once we have a very resurgent party, then other opposition figures fiddle. So in my own view, I think Parliament will have now to follow the ideology, the principles of the party.
But isn't that the whole concept of democracy, that yes, there's a majority and minority in Parliament, that both sides do not necessarily have to have to be on the same footing in terms of this parliamentary strength, that's why they are the minority. They still do serve a purpose, even if they do not have numbers that can match the majority.
They do. And I think it would be a pity, really, if NASA members of Parliament boycott parliamentary sittings, because you see, the essence of parliamentary debate is to actually have the two sides of the coin. If you look at the vetting that has just gone on, you know, there wasn't really much that going on. Really, I don't know whether you would call it vetting or just an endorsement of the list of the nominees. So my take is that with the fullness of time, the NASA members of parliament to come to their senses, because remember they were elected by their constituents to be representative of their interest in the National Assembly. And if you look at some of the bills that you've just run through, which are pending, some of them are actually very critical. Look at the bill like the petroleum bill. We are essentially trying to prepare the mechanism of how we are going to handle our oil explorations. And the beneficiaries of this resource primarily are people in the county. Remember there was a lot of wrangling about the percentages, how far the community can be involved. I'll be very surprised if really the opposition does not want to get an input into this. Because most of these areas are NASA stronghold. A lot of those bills essentially impact on the common man, the Wajiko. These are the people they're representing, whether they are calling them Nasarites or Jubilites. So it is very important for them to actually to close ranks and fully participate in the business of parliament, irrespective. Now the dilemma, of course, is this narrative that anything they do that is emanating from the government amounts to legitimizing a government they claim is not legitimate. Now, that is a narrative that they need to vacate sooner than later, because it's a straight box. It doesn't give them any flexibility to essentially look at the broader interest of the people they represent. Fred, just imagine, for instance, there will be bills about revenue allocation. You know, where basically the Committee of Revenue Allocation will have to bring their proposals to Parliament. These resources will be going directly to the counties, including the counties that they have support from. Yet they have no input, really. And then you're saying that you're going to have, you know, some people's assembly somewhere. People's assembly which have no legislative power. They have no resources. Remember, the primary function of parliament is to adjudicate on matters of taxation, and all those taxes will be distributed to the people who have been taxed.
Yes.
You know, in America they say, no taxation without representation. So these are issues, and I want to imagine that the reality will strike them that they cannot sustain the narrative that if they do anything that comes from government is legitimizing them for long, because that actually puts them into a lot of complications.
And that narrative, as Bwana Githaka says, appears to be a bit self-defeatist, because that means they will not take part in anything, the budget-making process. Jubilee already has the numbers, and they can just go ahead and do whatever they want. But for how long do you think they can keep this up? Just ignoring all parliamentary proceedings, hoping that something will happen. Already they have the mandate to take part in the legislative agenda of this country, but they've decided to not do that, simply because they say and they argue that doing anything will be legitimizing an illegitimate government. But for how long do you think they can hold that up?
One, Fred, issue that comes out very clearly is that NASA is getting not proper advice. They are becoming now irrelevant, irritants, because the mandate of being a member of parliament is to legislate, as my good friend puts it. Legislation involves discussions. It does not involve only voting. Even when people vote for a bill and they lose in that bill, the numbers that have dissented becomes very, very critical. Just like in court, you find a Supreme Court has 7 judges. The majority will have their say, but the minority's dissent is normally factored in. People start asking, the researchers start asking, what is it? What are the reasons that made the dissenters raise this issue? In another forum, that dissenting voice becomes the majority voice. So when NASA seems to be pulling out from the mandate it was given, we pay these people. They earn our taxpayers' money. They have a duty to be in parliament. Of critical concern is that the law as it is, the constitution as it is, there are no government members of parliament in parliament.
Yes.
I think there is a misnomer. We are still carrying the historical perspective that the ruling Jubilee Party has members who are supposed to support it. Under the new constitution of 2010, Parliament is an independent entity. Parliament is supposed to check the executive. But what we have now is that the executive has come and rained on Parliament. So, if Parliament loses its identity, the way it has lost its identity, if Parliament decides to be sycophants, the way they have become sycophants, then the question every Kenyan will be asking, what next? Are the laws that are going to be passed going only to affect NASA areas, or they will affect the whole country?
Yes.
You look at the question of the media. When the media was closed, it was not closed only for NASA regions. It was closed for Kenyans in this country, even for those in the diaspora. So my view is that we need the legislature to understand its role as it is provided for. That its role is to protect the taxpayers' money, to oversight the excesses of the executive. But seems that nobody has borrowed that. This country, the legislature has been turned into a voting machine. If you look at, let us not look at this parliament. Let us look at the historical development of parliament. The quorum used to be 30. The quorum now is 50. You will find that bills are passed with 5 people. What does the law say? The speaker has no eyes. The speaker, unless prompted to be told there is no quorum, whether it is only one member, he will allow the motions to proceed, and that one member will pass the law. And that is what we have seen in Parliament for quite some time. So the economic reality of parliamentarians is the primordial role why they are in Parliament. When you look at when do you see Parliament in full session, very active, it is when they are discussing bills that affect their remuneration. That time, every member of Parliament is present, they vote for that. So in that context, we see a full legislature. Number two...
And we'll come to that, the issue of how they can come together, what could actually bring them together at some point, if at all you get there. But now we're discussing the kind of risks we face, and one is the kind of behavior that NASA has adopted, staying away from all house business, which is a huge risk going forward. The second one is the Jubilee numbers. The fact that they seem to be, like today, for example, they're attending a parliamentary group meeting at State House. That means everyone will be whipped to go a certain way. They've raised questions about one member of the cabinet, but of course they could not even afford within themselves to say that we are going to question this person further. Because, yes, State House has said this, and of course we as Jubilee members have to do it this way. Don't you think that that's the other risk with the kind of numbers Jubilee has and the kind of control that State House has over Jubilee legislators?
That's true, friend. But that's basically the nature of party politics. Once you've elected on a certain party platform, it's assumed that basically you adopt the mindset of that party.
So you simply become a voting machine for that party?
Yeah, if that is a party position. Remember that the challenge we have is that we have parties that basically do not have a very clear ideological position. If you ask the difference between the NASA supporters and the Jubilee supporters, basically they will not be able to tell you. Purely in terms of clear economic differentiation, social policy, they're not there. And that's the dilemma we are actually facing. We are hoping that going forward, NASA will evolve into a political formation with a distinct ideology, and so will be Jubilee. But if you look at basically the effect of the boycott, is that Parliament is denied of critical inputs into what government policy, government legislation will be.
Yes.
And because that's essentially the role of Parliament. That even if the Nassarites may not have the numbers in Parliament, the fact they are able to criticize, they are able to question, they are able to say, hang on, why should we be able to, why should we endorse this gentleman if he has got this particular
even Jubilee
issue?
members should be able
even
to
Jubilee
do that.
members, they should be able to do that. But essentially what happened, remember, if you look at basically the logic, these are Jubilee's nominees, who were supposed to be, as it were, the frontline workers as far as realizing their promises are concerned. So if you look at that logic, then they are mutant, okay? Their independence is mutant to the extent that essentially they cannot appear to be...
Like in the case of that question where they've raised, and this is a very interesting thing, all cabinet nominees endorsed this on the Standard, page 7, but a member of the vetting team said they had reservations about one of the candidates, but still approved him nonetheless, because Jubilee members cannot question what the executive has said.
If we had the NASA people sitting in that particular committee, I can tell you that basically even the content of the final report will be somewhere within the news media, isn't it? But remember, this is now a closed house, okay? And these guys cannot do that. So you can see, NASA people are doing the public a disservice, including their supporters. Because remember, the cabinet secretaries will not serve the Jubilee people. The cabinet secretaries will serve this nation, the 45 million, irrespective. In fact, their oath of office says the work will serve without discriminating. So when they boycott themselves, for instance, if we talk about the gentleman in charge of sports and youth, youth of this country are all over the country. They will be in NASA strongholds, in Jubilee strongholds. So if we have a competent person in that docket, it basically benefits the entire Kenyan population. The taxes these fellows will be paid with are taxes collected from more Kenyans. So really, when you look at that logic, I think they will come to, and I'm persuaded, I stand to be corrected, that in the fullness of time they'll see the folly of what they are doing is not sustainable. It's hurting the very people that they are purporting to be representing.
What about Jubilee? Because there must be some dividend to be gained from actually distinguishing between the executive and the majority side in Parliament. That yes, even though it is one party in the executive and that holds a majority in Parliament, there should be some distinction, that members of Parliament can do more than just rubber stamp what the executive says, that they should actually be contributing towards improving bills sent by the government, instead of just saying it has to pass the way it is. If at all they have a question over a nominee, shouldn't it be to the benefit of the executive that Parliament can actually raise their voice, even if just the Jubilee side, and say no, here even the executive could do better?
The intricacies of party politics and the executive, there is really a very thin line. When you look at President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, they are the substantive heads of the executive. But also, they are the substantive heads of the party called Jubilee. The president is the president and the chair of Jubilee, the head of Jubilee. The deputy is a deputy de facto of Jubilee. So, when they are meeting today at State House, they are not meeting the head of state. The head of state will not be there. They are meeting the head of Jubilee Party.
At State House.
The question of the venue is another question. As I said, it's not easy to say this is President Uhuru Kenyatta and this is Jubilee Party leader Uhuru Kenyatta. It is because the state security, how it is crafted, that is the whole issue. So today they are meeting as the members of the political party called Jubilee. The person who will be sitting as the head will be the party leader called Uhuru Kenyatta of Jubilee. So the decisions they are going to pass are Jubilee positions. They are not going to pass anything called the executive. Once the party forms its policy, anybody who has an issue has a forum today to raise it. If there is any Jubilee member of Parliament, be satisfied he has a forum to raise it
away from
today. It's not State House. It is a party caucus. It is called a party caucus.
Do you imagine any member of Parliament attending that parliamentary group meeting actually raising his hand inside State House and saying, I think there you're wrong?
You see, that is the narrative that everybody has always said, that the president can order somebody to do something. There's an option of resigning. If a Jubilee member of Parliament does not agree with the way Jubilee is being run, what stops him from resigning? He writes a notice, serves it to Parliament, and says, I cannot be in this party.
What about the independence of an individual member of Parliament? Because you have your own brain, you were elected separately. Yes, you were sponsored by a party, but there are some ideologies you stand for. And there could be some disagreement or some improvement you could bring. Like in the case of this cabinet nominee, that they had reservations on.
When party, and I think it's important for us to talk about the party. What is a party?
The party.
What is it that brings people together to pursue political interest? It's an ideology, something you believe in. Ideology is like religion, right? We all go to church or to mosque, okay? And that is it. really, if you look at it, and this is the practice worldwide, the place of individual conscience vis-a-vis party ideology can only be exercised outside that particular party. If you feel strongly, for instance, that you do not agree with what the party stands for, then you have only one option: walk out. If you look at America, for instance, last time, we had a man called Bernie Sanders, who was very popular with mainstream Democrats. But the conservative Democrats, in quotes, were actually very opposed to his views because it was very extreme. He was actually sounding like a socialist. But you know, at the end of the day, the only option he knew that his agenda could be adopted is when they went to the National Democratic Party Conventional Party. He lobbied for his agenda to be included in the final party blueprint. So,
this convention that's held outside the White House or away from the president.
Yes. Remember during
KANU
days, the party caucuses were held at KICC.
Yes.
Right? Because KICC was associated with KANU. Yes, I think from a symbolic point of view, there's a challenge when you have these caucuses in State House. Because State House is basically understood to be the home or the seat of the executive. And Parliament represents the other arm of government. So, yeah, from a symbolic point of view. But remember, in politics, we talk about straightforward party ideologies, party expectation of members. The only place you can raise your dissatisfaction, if that is the case, is within those caucuses. And I'm persuaded, normally those caucuses are robust discussions. Remember, we had the gentleman, Ketel, and others, who actually went against what I think the caucus had agreed. And you know, the only option is basically to walk out. Because parties are very ruthless. Parties are very ruthless. Because parties want to maintain a grip on the members. Because their presence is actually manifested by those members in Parliament. So if we have weird members of Parliament doing what they want to do, friend, I can tell you, in the fullest time, you have no party.
Let me go in
Dunstan, we need to take a break and we'll come back to continue this discussion because the biggest concern is the kind of influence that both NASA and Jubilee have on their members of Parliament. NASA has convinced its members to stay away from all House business. Jubilee, on the other side, has gone full throttle in ensuring that all their members simply rubber stamp what the executive says. What does that mean for Kenya's legislature? That's after the break.